This record, you know this? Live at Pompeii, Pink Floyd? It's a pretty good record. I think it's an unofficial release, but easily one of my favorite Pink Floyd's. It was recorded before Dark Side of the Moon, a performance, live, mix of live and studio. It's a great record, Live at Pompeii. Did you hear about Kurt Cobain recently? You know, his death, his suicide? You know, there was some evidence that I recently learned, you know, that really throws some doubt on the official story. There's a good example where the media is presenting us a story with limited information. If we knew that his pockets, when he got home, and before he ran to the shotgun, evidently, his pocket still had his car keys in it, house keys, and a wallet, and the plane ticket, and a few other things were still in his pocket. No, that seems suspicious, because you would think, what's his hurry? To run to the shotgun, take out your keys at least, you know, maybe to have a little drink. I don't know. Who's so eager to kill themselves, which also don't add up. Because if he is a junkie, he's not going to go straight to the shotgun. First thing he's going to do when he gets home from the flight is shoot up heroin, for sure. 100%. That's what he was thinking about for 3 hours, probably on the entire flight. How badly can't wait to get home and use. And so when I learned that he'd blow himself away like right when he got home, it's very suspicious. You know, it doesn't add up. Plus, you know, junkie like Cobain, man. I know he lost control over his music. I know so many people had their fingers in him, and every time somebody called him, they wanted something from him, money, whatever, and he had no control over his life. And I'm sure that sucks. And he was depressed about his wife and the children and all that. But he had something to live for. The next hit. You know, that keeps junkies alive. You know, they can get high again. So, yeah, the whole story gives me a little bad feeling now that I learned some evidence that was not presented to us. So a good example of image and reality and comparing the two is with Nancy Pelosi. It's a good example. She retired finally from the Senate after like 40 plus years, you know, serving the best interest of the country. That's image. What is reality? Who knows? You know, that's a small group privy to it. But her husband, you know, what we heard is that he was assaulted by a MAGA wild man. Yeah. Well, there's some truth to that. It's kind of what happened. But what it really was some boy-on-boy play. You know, her husband was like, "Oh, you bad MAGA. Oh, you brute. Oh, you terrible MAGA." That's what that was about. But for us, you know, what we were given is an image of some violence and some home breaking and forced entry. But the image is not exactly the truth. Only part of the truth. You know, on this topic, like, you know, what I'm saying, image versus reality. What are we presented? What evidence do we see that are supported the public? What's left out, you know, that contradicts or maybe doesn't fit in with the official story? You know, this image, it's like a photocopy, perhaps. What we see on television is maybe 80% of the original image. You know, but it's blurry, the photocopy, or it's missing parts. And we only see maybe the face. We don't see all the surrounding when we look at the photo image. You know, because that's what an image is. You know, like religion, speaking abstractly, religion is, what is religion? It's an image of the spiritual universe. It's the way people codify and explain how the world works, divine truth, the energy, the spiritual energy. And this is religion is in essence an image of their understanding of the spiritual world, the unseen world, cosmic energy, the force. In essence, that's what religion is, an image. Like actors, let's say an actor is an image of, well, you have fame. Well, fame and money are not reality. They're rewards. So we can't say that, oh, he's an actor or he's got a PhD, he's educated. Well, a degree is not, it's an image of an education and smarts. They're not actually real substance. Anyway, so that's what I mean by image here and reality. Good example that also, the other day I was talking to somebody about the moon landing. This fellow was like hoax, 100% convinced, right? I didn't argue that. Actually, I didn't give it so much thought, but I did point out that all we really know, empirically speaking, is the Saturn V took off. After we lost sight of that rocket, everything else that's presented is an image. Television, telecommunications. And so people will say, oh, it can't be a conspiracy because hundreds of thousands of people worked on the moon landing project. And you can't fool that many people. And that's a good argument. It's true. But you don't have to fool all those people. Because 80% of what they saw or worked on was they weren't privy to perhaps the collusion that took place. So people were, let's say that I'm an engineer and I worked on the Saturn V, or I worked on the little buggy, or I worked on the breathing apparatus. Yes. But so what? You didn't go to the moon. Who went to the moon? Buzz Aldrin and Armstrong. And, whoa, they would have spilled the beans. They would never have, gone along with this story so long. It was impossible. Yeah, maybe. It could have been top secret to them. It was like, and the NASA officials, let's say, and this is hypothetically, I'm not saying this is what happened, but the small group of colluders at NASA would have told Buzz and Armstrong that we need your help, top secret. It's going to be sort of a specious presentation, production, but it's for the good of America. It's against Russia. And these were good American guys, rah, rah, rah. They would have, for sure, they would have gone along with it. I'm just saying, So if the moon landing was a hoax, it presents image in this way. The world, it would be a production. The people at the top who produced it, actors, like the astronauts, but everybody else was part of the extras crew on set. They were extras. All those 400,000, most of those people are extras. They did not firsthand see that let's say, Saturn V takes off. Let's make contact with the astronauts. Okay, they have a telephone line set up and ready to, fool people. You think it's real, talking on the other side, but it's not. It's an image. What's even maybe a stronger example is 9/11. That story. That's an image of reality, and no doubt about it. And, when it happened, I believed it. At the time, 30 years ago, I totally believed it was true. And I didn't give it much thought for many years afterwards. But there was always something about the official story that bothered me. That morning, planes hit the skyscrapers and collapsed. And I'm watching it on television, like so many other people, the image of the event. But I always had a little doubt in my stomach, because I asked, how did the passengers on the airplanes make those cell phone calls? It was impossible to use your cell phone at 20,000 feet, 10,000 feet. Hell, back then, those Motorola flip phones, crystal clear conversation for 20 seconds with your parents. give me a break. Not even from the runway it's possible. Hell, it's hard to talk like that from a city street at the time. That, technology had not advanced. So, I know with 9/11, a lot of people saw the whole thing, like on the rooftop of East Village. And of course they watched it. And I have no doubt they saw this event take place. And they have a strong argument. I was there. I watched it. I know people who are in the building. Of course it's not, of course it happened that way. But how it was organized and executed, a lot of that is image. And, but you got to ask people, let's say you watched the buildings fall, the plane strike. That day you watched it. No, it happened. Well, did you also see that 3 buildings fell, but only 2 planes hit? Did you also see the skyscrapers fall on their own footprint at the speed of gravity, like free fall? Which strongly suggests that the bottom of both structures was cut out by explosives so that the building could fall without resistance from below. I mean, did they see that? But I understand, it's our human nature just to see what we want to see and believe what we want to believe. And it was a horrible event, so I'm not going to go around, being hostile and, truculently argue with people that they didn't see it. It's like, okay. But, we don't even have to get into all the contrary evidence that suggests that the official story is bullshit. One story I heard from a friend in Germany, a guy I was hanging out with, and it's definitely a true story, I'll tell you, is he worked at the insurance company, and we was part of the team at the time where the account, the Twin Tower account, was transferred from an American insurance company to a German company 6 months before the tragedy, 6 months before. And I believe the premiums were jacked up on all the way to the sky, man. So the owner, who owned all 3 buildings, transferred his account to German carrier, not a local company with a lot of his buddies, I assume, worked there, and he didn't want to stick them with the bill. He wanted to nail the Germans, obviously. So 9/11 is a good example of evidence being missing. Most of the evidence is missing, not discussed. We see empirical, this image. What did we really see? 80%. We also see conspiracy versus collusion. The real conspiracy, of course, was the fact that the hijackers took over the planes, they say. That's the conspiracy, They got past all the security and they worked together and kept it secret and they did what they did, they say. That's the conspiracy. But between the media and perhaps the Pentagon, that would be collusion. It's very different animal. Conspiracies are hard to keep quiet, but collusions are a little bit easier because everybody has the same goal: to make money and power, gain power. But the media, they're the real colluders. Like anybody who questioned the narrative, the official story, was attacked. Organized attack to either shame the individual, how could you, or calumny, this guy's actually, a criminal, or who knows, he's got some crazy ideas, calumny, or they cancel if you're an actor or a program, you don't work again, and they threaten you, So anybody who really was raising doubt in the public was quickly eliminated. This is a lot like that myth or that fable of from the Trojan War, the Trojan horse. Well, the damn horse comes into the town, and there was one guy named Laocoön. We'll put a picture of the statue up on the screen. Well, the statue we see today that we have is him being strangled by snakes and vipers. Well, that's because he was going to blow the whistle. Don't bring this damn horse into our city. It'll destroy us. Well, the Troy people silenced them. You know, like the media sends out its snakes and goes after anybody, you know. We can't just cherry pick the evidence we like and dismiss the hostile information. We can't do that. You know, this is what Nietzsche means when he says, if it did not kill me, it makes me stronger. This is what Nietzsche is saying, that it's not his body, obviously, or physical, doesn't kill me. No, he means an argument, a belief. You know, it can be assailed on all sides by arguments, counter-arguments, contrary evidence, differing stories. But if the argument survives, it's stronger. And that's what it means. That's what it means. And with that bit of evidence, the deal is, you know, maybe we could say, I could see the non-conspiracy 9/11 folks, the official story, say, oh, well, it's possible the buildings fall on their own footprint. It's possible that the owner of the 3 buildings, it's possible this, it's possible that, it could have happened this way. But the phone calls are part of the official story. So, from my opinion, that torpedoes the official story. It doesn't add up. It contradicts. They're incompatible with the official story. How did they make those phone calls? Well, the only explanation I can come up with is, if you can't make phone calls on your cell phones in the year 2001 on a flip phone from the air, well, then the planes were on the ground. And that opens up a new rabbit hole, you know? It's like, oh, they're on the ground. Yeah, it has to be that way. Well, how'd they get on the ground, you ask? Well, maybe it has something to do with the new technology installed in airplanes in the year 2000, I believe, year 2000, a few months before the hijacking, where the Pentagon, in case of a hijacking, could remotely shut the cockpit door and control the plane remotely, fly it from the DC. They had that technology installed. And also, the cockpit and the flight attendants would not be able to communicate with each other. They would block communication. So the captain would be saying, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I can't control the plane. It's flying itself. And the flight attendants are saying something like, well, there's some 4 or 6 nicely dressed guys in the middle of the plane. They're not American. They have a bit of an accent, but I'm not sure where they're from. But they are not Arabs, and they don't look like hijackers. And they're telling everybody to stay calm, all the passengers, because this is some kind of drill. And they're telling people to stay calm and just go with the program, and it'll be okay. But they can't communicate, these two parties, because the communication's shut. They can't talk. They don't know what's going on. So let's say that the plane now lands in an Air Force base, let's say between New York and Boston. Makes the most sense, okay. Then the phone calls are made. That explains it. Well, then what do they send up? Well, you know, then something else is sent up, not those planes, you know. It has to be that way. Because that explains why at the crash site, or like at the impact into the skyscrapers, there is no baggage. There is no bodies, which doesn't make any sense, because every airplane crash I've seen, strewn all over with, you know, debris. But these didn't happen that way, which is very, very disconcerting also. Well, there's a lot of evidence. We don't have to go through it all. But I believe my explanation made just now is, you know, it's stronger. I don't know how. I haven't heard anything, any facts or whatever that contradict this scenario as I presented. Yeah, it's a pretty strong hypothesis. But my point is not so much to, you know, question 9/11. I want to just point out to people, you know, image, reality. They're not, don't confuse the two. And then ask a few questions. Am I being shown all the evidence, or am I being led to make a conclusion? that's probably not good for me or my family or the city or the country, but does benefit some people who are obviously misleading the people.